There are choices a person makes for survival, choices one makes for convenience, and then there are the rare, sacred choices one makes because the soul recognizes something before the mind fully understands it. For Gökberk Demirci, acting belonged to that last category. It was not a profession he stumbled into. It was not a shiny dream handed to him by fame or influenced by trend. It was something that called to him quietly, slowly at first, then louder, until ignoring it felt like betraying a part of himself. From a young age, Gökberk had been unusually observant. While other children ran recklessly through the world, he paused to watch. He paid attention to emotions, to expressions, to the way people's voices changed depending on what they carried inside. He remembered faces, gestures, glances. He memorized the unspoken language of human behavior without realizing he was doing it. Some would say he had an actor's eyes long before he ever thought of becoming one. He grew up with stories, some told, some overheard, some imagined. His mind was a place full of characters, each one vivid and alive. When he walked through crowds, he would find himself wondering about people's private worlds. What was the man at the bus stop thinking about? Why did the woman in the store look sad when she thought no one noticed? He wasn't trying to analyze them. He simply felt drawn to the humanity in every story. Years later, he would describe this instinct as the first thread that pulled him toward acting. I didn't choose acting because I wanted to be someone else. I chose it because I wanted to understand people more deeply. At first, he didn't consider acting a practical path. Like many talented individuals, he carried that quiet fear that artistry was too delicate for the real world, too fragile for survival. He imagined something more conventional for himself, something predictable. But life has a way of guiding those with creative fire toward the very place they belong, even if they try to walk in the opposite direction. It started with a school activity, nothing grand, nothing planned, a small performance, a stage barely wide enough to take a few steps, and an audience of impatient classmates. Gökberk had been asked to take a minor role, something so trivial that he almost declined. Acting wasn't on his mind then, but when he stepped onto the stage and delivered his first line, something shifted. It wasn't applause he fell in love with. It wasn't attention. It was a stillness, the moment where every sound in the room fell silent because people were watching him transform into someone else. There was power in that silence. Not power over the audience, but power over himself. Power in discovering a part of his identity he had never accessed before. He remembered thinking, for the first time, this is where I feel complete. But that realization didn't immediately push him into acting as a career. It simply planted a seed. Life moved forward, responsibilities grew, and practicality whispered its usual warnings. Acting, people said, was uncertain. Acting was difficult. Acting was unpredictable. And yet, unpredictability had never frightened him. If anything, the idea of living a perfectly predictable life frightened him more. He began studying acting, not with the intent of chasing fame, but with the desire to shape the raw passion he felt. The more he studied, the more he understood that acting wasn't just about portraying a character. It was about surrendering. It was about allowing oneself to feel deeply, to connect honestly, to tell truths through fictional worlds. He learned to listen with his entire being. He learned to breathe with intention. He learned that a role isn't something an actor performs. It's something an actor becomes. Acting made him feel human, in a way nothing else did. It gave him space to explore every emotion without fear or judgment. In everyday life, people suppress their feelings, hiding vulnerability behind politeness or composure. But in acting, vulnerability was currency. Honesty was strength. Emotion was language. Acting didn't restrict him. It freed him. Still, one of the biggest reasons he chose acting came from something deeper, the desire to connect. To him, storytelling was a bridge between souls, a way to leave an imprint on someone else's heart, a way to say, I've lived through this feeling too. You're not alone. When he first stepped in front of a real camera, he felt that old-school stage stillness return. Only this time, it was stronger, more profound. The quiet hum of the equipment, the weight of the lights, the intensity of the crew watching, none of it made him nervous. Instead, it made him peaceful. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing. He was creating. He was giving life to a character who existed only on paper before he stepped into the role. And that transformation, he realized, was something sacred. Gökberk believed acting was a responsibility. When millions watched, they weren't just watching a show, they were investing their emotions, their time, their thoughts. He carried that responsibility with humility. He never saw acting as a means to fame. He saw fame as something that simply happened when you were devoted to your craft. What mattered more to him was doing justice to every character he played. He often reflected on how acting allowed him to live 1,000 lives within one lifetime. Through characters, he experienced heartbreak, courage, betrayal, triumph, vulnerability, sometimes all within a single script. Acting allowed him to explore the deepest corners of the human soul, places most people never visited even within themselves. And perhaps the greatest reason he chose acting was this: the chance to grow endlessly. There was no finish line in this craft. No point where he could say, "I've learned everything." Every role taught him something new. Every story changed him in some way. Acting wasn't a profession for him. It was a lifelong journey of becoming. He realized that the world often misunderstood acting as playing pretend. To him, it was the opposite. Acting demanded truth, a deeper truth than most people showed in their real lives. A character's emotions were not toys. They were reflections of universal human experiences. To portray them authentically required empathy, discipline, and extraordinary sensitivity. And Gökberk naturally possessed these qualities. He expressed once, in a quiet conversation with a colleague, that acting revealed who he truly was. In the process of becoming different characters, he discovered new layers of himself, strengths he didn't know he had, fears he hadn't confronted, dreams he hadn't acknowledged. Acting for him was a mirror and a map. He chose it because it allowed him to feel alive. He chose it because it allowed him to challenge himself. He chose it because it made him better, not just as an artist, but as a human being. But there was another reason, one he rarely said aloud. Acting gave him purpose. Not the kind of purpose that came from ambition, but the kind that came from meaning. He wanted his work to touch people, to inspire them, to comfort them, to encourage them to feel bravely. When fans reached out saying his performances helped them through difficult times, he felt a warmth nothing else could give him. That was when he realized that acting wasn't just a career. It was service, a way to contribute to the emotional landscape of the world.